Princess Kate has been seen for the first time in public since her abdominal surgery. Kate was pictured wearing sunglasses in the passenger seat of a 4x4 Audi with her mother, Carol Middleton, near Windsor Castle. And we're still joined in the studio by James Price, Research Fellow at the Centre for Policy Studies and former Government Senior Special Advisor. You're going to have to get a shorter job title there, mate, because we've only got a couple of hours. Good to see that Kate's back in action. This emanated from a picture that's being distributed by an American agency where they saw no harm in this picture. It was a picture of her looking healthy in the back of a car, but in Britain, apparently, we've all decided not to use this picture because somehow or another it's intrusive on her privacy. There you have it. Freedom of the press in America, but not here.
It is wonderful, isn't it, the fascination that America seems to have with our royal family. They decided they didn't want it, and yet they're almost more obsessed with it than we are. And, of course, they get the bum deal of getting Harry and Meghan. Poor them.
True. But there has been so much conversation. Is she going to come back? How is she doing? How bad is it? How poorly is she? Well, she's, clearly not bedbound. She's been seen in a car, out and about. And it seems to me that sort of the palace has rushed out, or at least have fallen over themselves, perhaps accidentally put out there that she's going to be at Trooping of the Colour in the summer. So, in that respect, some positive news, a positive spin on this, that she's going to be OK. We're expecting her back, maybe not tomorrow, but it is in train.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really good news. I mean, the problem is that, as we all know, with His Majesty's cancer diagnosis, with the princesses having her own surgery as well. Now, Camilla, the Queen, who's been fronting up things, is having to take a break as well because she's been doing so much of it on her own with this kind of slimmed-down monarchy, all these different challenges. I mean, that is a lot that's difficult, right? And we can see perhaps that the normally very, very slick PR machine inside the palace has struggled a little bit with this story. They've obviously wanted to protect her privacy as she convalesces from this surgery, but, it has led to this kind of speculation. And I just think it's great that we see that she's OK again.
I'll tell you, I said this a lot last week. I said, well, hang on a second. When was it revealed? Just after Christmas, early January, that she'd had this surgery. And the palace said, it's quite serious and you won't see her again until after Easter. We seem to leave it 3 weeks and go, where the hell is she? Well, they told us that we wouldn't see her until Easter.
I think the problem is we know what's up with the king and we don't know what's up with Kate, and that's the thing. It's kind of like sick human intrigue, isn't it, that you want the gory details of, well, what is it? What sort of abdominal surgery? And the internet's gone wild with all the speculation. But it is up to her, it's private whether or not you want to disclose your medical conditions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the palace would probably take the trade-off, as would we all, of a bit of speculation about what's been going on that side of it, because, as you say, we know what's wrong with His Majesty, and that has led to so many people going and checking up their own prostates and getting checkups like that, older men. It's a really big deal. Got issues like this in my own family. It's great to see that His Majesty was brave enough to talk about, quite personal things. And so that the flip side of a lot of people getting checked out and hopefully a lot of lives being saved because His Majesty said this, I think they have to just deal with the speculation and, as you say, the gory details of what's been happening with Kate.
By the way, this leaked out. The palace accidentally sort of tipped us all off by listing her in the among the dignitaries who attend the Trooping of the Colour in June. So that's how we kind of found out.
She's doing the inspecting. We can actually see, I believe, what has been put up online by the Ministry of Defence about Trooping of the Colour. And I think it actually suggests that she's going to be doing the checking of the troops. Because in Trooping of the Colour, they all line up and someone has to go up and down and make sure their shoes are shiny and their weapons a cock or whatever it is that they do. And I think she gets that particular role. So good on Kate. Right, so moving on. There's been a big sort of hoo-ha over the fact that Buckingham Debonair, who is the shadow culture minister at the Labour Party, has described Rule Britannia as not my favourite bit of music, but she insisted that she'd leave any decision about its future to the BBC. She was being asked about comments that were made by Cannae Mason, who is that young cellist who played at Harry and Meghan's wedding, I believe. And I think, in many respects, trying to tiptoe around the issue, have her cake and eat it and not come down on one side or the other. She said, it's not my favourite bit of music. The Proms is a fantastic institution. And she says it's a decision for the people who run the proms. But she has sort of also said that for a lot of people, it's a very British moment, but for a lot of others, it will feel alienating. So she's sort of trying to sort of peddle both sides of the argument here. When actually, I think what we really want...
I don't agree it will make people feel alienating. I think it's a classic load of left-wing crap.
No one would think that about Rule Britannia unless someone somewhere with a big dob on them says it, and then it becomes trendy to follow it up. I don't think before there was a hoo-ha about this Sheku Kanu Mason saying it, who, again, I don't think himself came out of the box and said it. He was asked.
No, he did come out of the box. He's the guy that walked out of the last night of the proms because he didn't like Land of Hope and Glory, and he said so. He told the BBC. He's a dyed-in-the-wool Britain hater.
I just think you follow the dominoes, and there's one person somewhere who makes 100 grand a year being some sort of social justice warrior for race, who makes a comment, it goes everywhere in the newspapers, and everyone starts jumping on the bandwagon, and it all adds up to essentially vandalising our culture.
I want the Shadow Culture Secretary to explain why the hell she thinks Rule Britannia is alienating to a lot of people. I'd like her to explain that. Or is she just spewing out, regurgitating left-wing rubbish?
Well, it's definitely the latter, isn't it? Yes. At the very least.
Yes, it is.
It's definitely that. It may also be that she's trying, as you say, to sort of wink to one side and say, don't worry, I'm enlightened as well. I don't like all of this patriotic nonsense. Invite me to fun events and things like that. But at least she's also said, oh, I'm not going to ban it. Well, thank goodness for that.
No, thank you.
The first thing that she's going to do...
Wait till they get in power.
Exactly right. And of course, I'm not entirely sure what the culture secretaries always end up doing in these sorts of roles when they're talking about the music and things like that. But Alex, you're exactly right when it comes to the structural reasons as to why we get these problems. So many people now make a very, very good living going into companies, going into other organisations, looking around and saying, oh, yeah, no, that's very racist, you can't have that. Oh, no, that's very bigoted, pay me some more money to do a report on all these kinds of things. If you didn't stoke this kind of stuff up, nobody would care and we'd all be one united country.
And by the way, Thangham Debonair suggested that the rousing anthem, Rule Britannia, could be replaced by a folk song instead. Anything but that. Don't give us a folk song. Please, no folk songs.
You probably can't have a folk song because I'm sure that's a predominantly white type of British music, so that probably won't be allowed either, let's be fair.
Hey, Thangham, you want a tip from me? Don't talk about Rule Britannia again or Land of Hope and Glory. It gets you into trouble. As you discovered.
Just defend our culture, perhaps. Right, now we're going to do a bit of everything going wrong in the police roundup, and this is a pretty shocking story here. A prisons watchdog has said it's deeply shocked after a vulnerable teenage girl was forcibly strip-searched by male officers at a child jail. Apparently, there were no female officers available at the time. This is Wetherby Young Offenders Institution. And this girl was subjected to inappropriate use of pain-inducing techniques, apparently. I mean, it's pretty...
Yeah, this doesn't sit well, does it? It's not a nice bit of imagery that is conjured up, given recent things in the Sarah Everard case and other areas as well. And my big concern about this is that with regard to the police in recent years, it looks like if you're going to be violent and you're going to be aggressive, the police will back off and they'll leave you alone. Let's see all these hate marches every single Saturday, pro-Hamas hate marches everywhere, and the police will just back away. They'll hope that you take photographs of their faces and things like that, and then afterwards they'll go and nick you if you've done something too badly wrong. But if you're going to be peaceful and cooperate, then the police tend to get violent. So look at, again, the Sarah Everard case, a bunch of girls protesting quietly, sitting down at a nighttime vigil. The police go in supremely heavy-handed and go and beat them up and arrest them and all the rest of it. It's the wrong way around.
Right, now sticking with police, it's also heartwarming to learn that apparently Met police officers are routinely failing to record basic details about sex offenders. This is 14 months they've kept this internal report hidden away. But essentially, these are a range of sexual offences, from your flashing to your groping to, you know, your more serious offences. But if there's one thing I would say as a woman, and just looking at sort of the way these things play out, your Wayne Cousins start off as flashers, don't they? And they just get worse and worse. If there's one thing about a sex offender, they usually start little and then progress into becoming absolute monsters. And if you don't know who they are, if you're not holding them to account, if you haven't recorded their face, how on earth are you going to protect women?
Yeah, I mean, the point about this is an internal report after they got Wayne Cousins. Even the police realised, even the Met police realised, something wrong here, we're not doing a very good job. So they commissioned this internal report, which found that they routinely don't record basic details about sexual offences, sexual offenders and the victims. Had they have done so, the report concluded many rapists could have been caught. Instead, they're walking the street. And what happened when the Times found out about this report 14 months ago? The police tried to keep it a secret. The Times has won a long-running legal dispute with the Met, who have now had to disclose that they're completely useless.
Yeah, I mean, they say sometimes it's not the crime, it's the cover-up. In this case, it's both, and it's the cover-up about lots of crime. Yeah. It's deeply worrying. And there's been a big drive recently to say, well, we respect the independence of the Met, the operational independence of the Metropolitan Police. I'm not entirely sure why that should be the case. It's sort of split between the Home Secretary and the Mayor of London in a sort of other capacity as the Police and Crime Commissioner. It seems to me that the kind of responsibility for sorting out the Met is falling between those two stools. And perhaps if we hived out the kind of terrorism avenue and some of the financial crime and things like that to maybe the National Crime Agency, which we established 10 or so years ago, and let the Met then actually get properly regulated and sorted and focus on bread and butter crime, that would be a better outcome.
Moving on, Downing Street has slammed Chris Packham, the TV star who's big on eco-protests, as being irresponsible because he has defended the right of Just Stop Oil to stage demonstrations outside MPs' private homes, in which will be the MPs' terrified spouses and their terrified little children quite often. Downing Street is quite right on this. Chris Packham's up the wrong street here, isn't he?
I mean, I think he should be absolutely ashamed of himself. I think it's disgraceful. And this really, really demeans politics. It makes for worse MPs, which is the last thing we need right now. It makes for people, as we saw recently with the threats to MPs around the Gaza vote that happened the other week, any kind of intimidation moving towards political violence is an absolute brain death for a society. We've seen this for thousands of years. When this happens on the streets of ancient Rome, when it happens in the French Terror, happening today in Britain in 2024 is absolutely disgraceful.
Now, when I first saw this next headline, I thought, yeah, I can believe this. This is apparently an American think tank, Sapien Labs, trying to promote themselves and all of their research by creating the headline that the UK is the second most miserable country. And I thought, yeah, kind of feels like it at the moment. But then when I looked at their breakdown, Uzbekistan's worse. That's the only one that's worse. But when I looked at the breakdown of the places that are apparently supposed to be super happy, the most cheerful is the Dominican Republic. I can imagine that, but I think it's pretty crimey. But you've got up there places like Sri Lanka, which, as far as I knew, had like no medicines, nothing on the supermarket shelves, was circling the financial plug hole and no stable government. And then also El Salvador, crime capital of the world.
Have you been to the Dominican Republic? I wouldn't have said there's all that many grounds to be incredibly happy if you live there, trust me.
Nice weather, mind.
Yeah, well, but it is very a developing country, shall we say. It's got a long way to go.
But I think on El Salvador, I can kind of believe that, right? They elected a guy who did, as we would like to see happen here, arrested all the worst offenders, built some supermax prisons, and crime has gone from the murder capital of the world to the lowest in the Western Hemisphere and safer than Canada. So on El Salvador, I can believe it. But I like the idea that these American researchers start calling up Brits and asking them, and they just get an earful from someone for an hour on the phone and go, yeah, that sounds miserable. And the Brit goes, oh, it was a lovely conversation with that nice man across the Atlantic, and move on.
I'll tell you what's great about the Dominican Republic, though. If you're a paedophile and you want to buy a private island, go to the Dominican Republic. They'll sell you one.
Right, the tourist board are calling you up, Kev, to do some work on their behalf.
He knew where to get his island from.
I can see that.
Those happy people in the Dominican Republic.
I can see that on bloody London Underground posters. Pedo, the Dom Rep is for you. How about look up our special private island service? Anyway, moving on. Your texts and tweets have been coming in thick and fast this lunchtime. Not on that subject, thankfully. Andrew says, I'm British. I'm proud to be British. I love Rule Britannia and other songs which make me proud to be British.
Meanwhile, Carol has texted saying, Rule Britannia is a British song. If people feel alienated, I suggest they find a country to live in whose songs they approve of. Very good.
And Sue has messaged to say no one is forced to listen to or attend the proms. It's a totally accessible classical music festival. Rule Britannia is both classical and traditional. She's got a point.